Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Red Path. My name is Dara, and you are watching the Skulltakers, a show where we talk to World Eater champions, people who have won tournaments, taking our boys right to the top. And today we're interviewing Dan O'Hearn, a longtime friend of mine who recently won an event in Ireland, in Cork, called Dearg Doom, which was run by me. And Dan won this event in supreme style, bringing I think it's safe to say, the worst World Leaders list that has done well in my entire time of playing World Leaders. Dan, it is awesome to have you on the channel. It's been a long time coming, but how are you doing today, man?
Great, thank you for having me on the channel. I've looked forward to this since Sunday, like with bated breath. Um, it has been, I love the channel and you guys here, you do great work, and I love the banter and everything that you had, and I'm glad I can be a part of that now.
Yeah. So for anyone who doesn't know, this episode of the Skull Takers is probably going to be a little bit looser and more fun because myself and Dan, we've known each other for quite a while. I think it's safe to say that Dan was one of the more formative people involved in my competitive upbringing, so to speak. Still remember a day that I did bad in RTT when I was young. Dan took me aside in the pub afterwards and had a stern talking to with me for many hours, telling me how to get good. And yeah, it seems that it kind of worked. But this event, so we're gonna have another video coming out on this event in the next week, talking about me actually running my first ever event. But today we're going to be talking about Dan's run at Dearg Doom, and it's quite a special run because Dan brought, I think a lot of people are calling it the kitchen sink, for want of a better word. It was a real mishmash of different World Eater units, and
Yeah.
the creation of the list was particularly interesting. Dan, why don't you talk to us about, you know, why you wanted to go to the event, what you were hoping to get out of it, and then bring us into the list and kind of why you decided to take what you did.
Sure. So let's start at the start. The why. So we've been friends a long time, and I've loved the journey you've come on competitively. You've gone from like literally starting out just taking random things almost seemingly at times to like going through a whole formative process when you take your lists and like having watched that journey, I've loved it the whole way along. I've gotten to play you both like over a kitchen table and at a tournament, and every time like some of my favorite games I've ever played have been with you. um Especially hungover the next day at a particular event, and I had mocked you the whole evening beforehand.
And the night,
uh,
and the night, we were
and the
staying in the
night
same
and the
room,
night
and you would not shut up until like 5 in the morning.
Yeah, it was brilliant.
Yeah.
And it was so for like the why of it, so I played with the Irish team for WTC. I'm absolutely honored every time I get to go across with those guys. They're fantastic. And it is something that it takes a lot of effort. Like there's a lot that goes into team play. It's a different version of 40K as well. A lot of people say that that you can take a singles player and you can make him a team player. It's not doesn't necessarily translate immediately, but the friends you make out of it from all abroad at home, like I've ended up some of their weddings and things like that as well. It ends up being an amazing journey, but it does take a lot of work. There's a lot of preparation. You make matrices, and when we were coming back, like a big part of all of that experience is getting in new people, building a community, and that's what Dark Doom to all of us was about. And like that was very much the impression we got from you as well. So we have just come back from WTC essentially. It's only like 2.5, 3 weeks ago. It feels like a lifetime ago already. And for us, supporting this local event, as far as we saw it for Cork, in particular, where the scene had been huge and had kind of collapsed back in again, bringing all that back up was very important to us. So when we could turn around to you and say, we will all attend this, but we won't do it in our traditional way. So we would go across with our perfectly, as far as we could tell, our perfectly optimized lists. Um, and that mindset of, as I said at the event, there is no I in Team Ireland. Um, and getting people into that whole experience of it's not about you, it's about the team. But as I said, there is a lot of work that goes into it. So coming back here to be able to say, right, well, how do we tone that back in for what is going to be a relatively new Cork scene? How do we kind of bring, let's say, the intimidation factor out of it a bit? Because let's face it, when you turn up to your first event and if you get absolutely railed by somebody and like there's literally no way you can play it to their list, that's a horrible experience. When you can make a game of it and you can like you're also limiting yourself, you make it a bit more fun for the opponent and you make it a bit more fun for yourself. So this kind of dovetails now into the kind of like taking the list and like the
Yeah.
whole philosophy of it.
There's a bit of
So
a kind of a context around the whole taking of the list, right? Because I mean,
yeah.
I love the idea that you guys showed up and you were like, all right, we're gonna kind of go on holiday mode for yourselves, but also
Mm,
to ensure that those newer players in the Cork scene are having a more positive experience, which
mm,
meant an awful lot to me. Meant a lot, first of all, that you guys were coming straight after the WTC because, I'm sure you were all absolutely drained. But that you would also make the effort to make this an experience for those newer players that,
mm.
would encourage them to keep coming back rather than discourage them if they get absolutely railed, as you were saying. Um, and, being an event that I run, I think a couple of people were sort of like, well, Dara can't bring his world eaters. So what if I do? But yeah, I'll turn it back over to you and kind of explain how that all came about.
Yeah, so there was kind of it was a bit of a double-edged sword in terms of for me though it came at it from two angles. One was like there kind of is a bit of burnout with WTC where you're like I don't want to play at that level where you're trying to because you're getting points for the team, so you want to make sure you're doing your best the whole time. Not for you, it's literally for the other guys you've come with. Um, but for us coming back, it was okay. What can we get out of this? And just like outside of the fun is like, can we make this a bit of an exercise? And it was very much a thing of saying, okay, there's lots of newer players here. How about we really put out like a bit of a we put on the training wheels on the list a little bit. Like we kind of railroaded a little bit into like this is a harder experience. Maybe push it outside of our normal wheelhouses. So from Team Ireland in particular, there was myself and Colin and Joe, and Colin plays Eldar. So we gave him instead of having like a million units that can move like 16 to 24 inches a turn, he had a Yandon list which all moved like 8 a turn. He had like 9 units, and of that, like 6 of them could score. So he was limiting himself very much in terms of gameplay. It wasn't his usual thing. For Joe, pulled in like all of the utility movement and all of that jank that he would normally have in his world leaders and pull that in. And for me, I like my guns when it comes to lists. And for me,
I've been
I
on the
haven't,
receiving end of those guns many a time, and it's been rough.
yeah. And I very much had the goal of take something melee based. And when I found out that Jay, one of our really good buddies, was taking your world leaders, I was saying, oh well, if that's an option, I would love to get in on that. Unbeknownst to me at the time, but it kind of nicely segued into the way that I was designing the list. Dara had given out pretty much most of his good toys. Um,
Pretty much all of them. Yeah.
yeah, pretty much all of them.
Jay was taking
Um,
my current non-grand competitive list, which is a lot of stuff. Joe was taking 15 of my berserkers and my winged demon prince, and then you came along and we're like, hey.
And like I've been a long time lover of your paint jobs. In particular, a certain Drake from Hell, which I convinced you to take to commentary once, and I never heard it back for how much you hated it. So that for me was like I absolutely wanted the Heldrake in the list. And I was trying to look at literally the models you had available left, and the fact that you had your main Angron there and available was like I was weak right from that moment. So then I was literally limited to things like your Predator, which is gorgeous, but it's a Predator in World Leaders, which is kind of hard to use. Um, and yeah, that's basically how the list happened. Was literally turning into, oh my god, like like this is all I have to choose from.
Yeah. So
And
why
that
don't you
actually
actually
was kind of great.
take us through the list from
Yeah.
top to bottom so that people can get an overview? Because I've seen people saying online, oh, you were effectively playing with an 1800 point list because it's just the Heldrake that was the bad part. But that's far from the truth. The entire list is really garbage. So why don't you go through the whole thing and we'll we'll give people the full picture
Yeah.
here.
Let me just put it up there, just so I have it nice in front of me. So I have the unit of Jackals. Your Jackals in particular are stunning. And I was super happy to have some of those in it. You do need some sword troops to literally make any list work. The fact that they had sticky was probably what saved me through most of getting points across the weekend. They're a fantastic unit. They don't really do much killing in this list, even though I tried at many points because a big part of this was going across and having a bit of fun. So I often did the what we used to send to one of our other friends, Dara. What would Khorne do? Um, it very much came down to sometimes they charged and they just absolutely murdered the thing they touched. So they were great. 10 Khorne Berserkers, the staple of any good Khorne fluffy list or competitive list. They're a fantastic unit, and they went with Khorne in a Rhino because that's just great crack. And also, once again, the limitations on I think I had a choice of 10 Berserkers or 5 was basically the choice. Your Angron, of course, the biggest, reddest, maddest boy in the world. Stunningly painted and was kind of like the linchpin of just not getting absolutely destroyed every round. I took 3 Exalted 8-bound because that's what I was able to take. And they're, I mean, it would have been way better to have them as just 8-bound to give the reroll ones and have the scout move. But once again, this was about limiting myself in a lot of ways. So having them as Exalted did open up some other options. But in general, they were kind of more directed away from the regular A-bound and more onto the Exalted in terms of gameplay. Then 10 and 5 Terminators. Look, Terminators and World Leaders are quite expensive, and they're quite slow. And it is something where I very much said to myself, this is something where I've seen your Terminators. I know they're gorgeous models, and you had them available, which was also one of the major criteria, because I wanted an exclusive army made of all of your toys. They are semi-durable at points, but you do have to play very, very well with them in terms of board position. I had a Hellbrute. The choice of weapons on the Hellbrute was literally, I got you to show me a picture of 3 of them, and I picked the prettiest one. That was literally the criteria. In fact, you could even vote on the Red Hat, maybe show the 3 and see if I made the right choice.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think
Um,
most people will know because one of them was painted much more recently than the other
it
two.
was
So
much more recently, but the one with the 2 fists is
the
kind of
two
cool.
fists is
But
yeah, he's got a vibe. Yeah,
if you did more of your oils on it, it might be able to
yeah,
catch up a bit.
yeah.
Then we had the Heldrake. That literally, I was so happy when you were able to pull it out because there was a number of toys we couldn't find that you weren't able to find in your collection.
Yeah, there was a moment
Um,
you were gonna run Dread Talons, and
yeah,
apparently lost all my jump pack troops. So
and I was like, okay,
yep,
fair enough. But that was definitely one where once the Heldrake was an option, that was huge for me. I wanted to use one again for ages. I've always loved them though in all of my lists whenever I can get them in. And then a Predator Destructor, because that was literally the one you had.
yep.
Yeah, and the Rhino for the Berserkers, and that was the list.
It's a list. It's a
It is
list.
it is definitely an assembly of models
Yeah, that equates
in
to
a
almost
legal
2,000
format.
points.
It definitely comes in the format of a list.
Yep.
And it was very much, as you said, models that were available and what we could get together.
Yeah.
And let's face it, right on the table, it actually looked so good.
It did come together nice aesthetically, but it's one of those lists where I mean you probably have the same experience when you're at a singles event and you pair into someone and you look at their list before you walk up to the table and you're like, oh, this is like the Ultramarines player who brought one of everything kind of a thing. Um that's kind of what this list looks like, and I feel like you walk into those games being like, all right, this should be a pretty easy win, which in the hands of most pilots, I think it's fair to say that that list is going to be incredibly difficult to take to an actual win. But somehow you managed to win an event with it. So let's flip to talking about that, and we'll
Sure.
go through your matchup. So we'll touch on what you were playing into, how you felt about it, and what were the key moments that maybe swung the game or were
Mm.
particularly memorable, or all that kind of stuff.
Okay. So it is worth noting, before I sound like a complete moron, that during this event there were spot prizes for doing very like cool things in games. Uh, I very much wanted to like get in the spirit of it, so I made some questionable decisions in the first few games for exactly that reason. Which nicely ties in with game one. So I played the wonderful John Power. He was playing Hypercrypt, and I remember the night before, myself and Colin and Joe were drinking, and then you came out as well, and I was like, I don't know how I'll catch them. And honestly, it was a game where I like my deployment was I'm putting everything down here, like just right in the middle, just putting it straight down, but I'm running out in the open. And I went because he put down a few things and he put them on it or somewhere where I might be able to charge it. And I went, look, on the first turn, I'm just going to try and charge them on it because that's hilarious. And that's what Karen would do. And then you announced to the round that the first person to make a charge would get a spot prize. So I drew my cards, and it was pretty much to do like to pretty much hit where I was, and the other one was to go out and take an objective for extend, and the monolith was right next to an objective. So Angron, I shouted blood for the blood god because that's what you wanted for the spot prize, and literally hammered him like 29 inches across the table, and first charged the monolith in the open. He brought it down to a wound. So that was hilarious. Most people hadn't finished deploying, and
No, no,
or
no.
or even
Most
or even had
most
the
of it,
pre-game
yeah,
discussions.
most people hadn't finished the pregame discussion, and you were shouting for the spot prize. I was just like, for fuck's sake, Dan, like
Because my
please.
because my opponent was like, "Are you actually deploying like that?" And I was like, "Yes." I was like, because I could tell he wasn't unfamiliar with the game, so like he kind of knew he was doing a bit, but I was kind of like, I've never seen his name at any event, so I was like, I'm going to treat him like he's entirely new. Now he did play very well during the game, um, but and he did kill Angron in the first turn, but 40k is easy, so I rolled 666 on my next turn. Angron immediately came back.
Yeah, I remember distinctly looking down the hall and seeing you do your like ballerina dance, the hands
Oh
over the
my!
head. And I was just like, I know exactly what is after happening down there. Because then he died and just immediately respawned for you, right?
Yeah, immediately respond.
Yeah.
I was just like,
40k is easy.
40k is easy, man.
Hmm.
Just roll dice.
Yeah.
It's all good. So yeah, so that game, we had a lot of cool moments because I very much wanted him to have that thing of like he'd start moving something. I'd be like, look, just so you're aware, like these things here, they do move. Everything moves very quickly in this army. Um, and there was a lot of really cool moments where like he had never had the real opportunity to use Imitek's ability. So he was like, "Do you mind if I use it?" Because like we'd gone through like the shooting phase or something, and I was like, "No man, if you've never used it, I want to see it happen." And then he turned around and killed four Terminators, killed a set of Jackals and some Berserkers with it because it went off on a 6 on every single unit. And I was kind of going, awesome. That's
Yeah.
totally good. And he went, thanks so much. That was amazing. Um,
Real cathartic
so
moment for him.
oh, that was so cool. Even I was kind of going, that's great. That's fantastic. Like the amount of memories of like individual moments from that game were absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I have
Um,
some questionable ones, such as walking over to your table at one point and seeing that you had used the only 8 bound in your entire list to deep strike in your deployment zone to do containment behind
yeah,
your main ruin. And I
because
was
I knew
like,
it'd annoy you.
I just walked over and I was like, really? This is what you want to use that unit for? Like, you only
Yeah.
have one of these and you've chosen to not put them in the game at all. I was so angry with you.
What might have annoyed you more was I literally had nowhere for Angron to go when he came back. So I pulled containment when he respawned, and I put him on an objective doing containment, and then I put the 8 bound down out of the game, also doing containment, and I went, there we go. And he was like, "You're not going to be able to charge anything for like 2 turns." And I went, "Okay." I was
Yep.
like, I was like, "That's." I was like, "I'll get some points out of it," but I was like, also, I was like, "I can charge anything here," and he's like, "I'm not going to move there," and I'm like, "That's what you think." Spoilers: he did not move there. But I thought it was like the thing of like it gave him more agency to do stuff on the rest of the table. Um, but everything kind of just seemed to like gel well. Like occasionally when certain things proc off, like the predator goes into something and it just kills half a unit. Um, there was a lot of fun moments after it.
Yeah.
So I
You
racked
killed
up
the
the scoring.
monoliths with the Drake, right?
So yeah, so I was gonna say like so I'm gonna do it like the key highlight of every game at the end,
Cool.
and the key highlight of that game is so I charged the Heldrake at the monolith. I however had to tank shock it to do it because everyone online I saw them they were like, how did I kill it? And it's like it has dead wounds 2+, and I was like, no, actually I killed it with the tank shock because um the problem with uh the problem with charging it is that it could have actually fought it back because he overwatched with a single destroyer, a single heavy destroyer, rolled a 6, and I failed to save, so I was on 6 wounds.
Oh
So he
my!
could have
The flat
actually
six gun just
like
popped him.
he like he didn't even overwatch the monolith. He was like, I'm going to do this really awesome thing, right? Just because I like we kept saying 40k is easy, and we do like some nonsense roll. So he was like 40k is easy, and then roll a 6 on the thing, and I was like, awesome.
40k really is easy.
That is fantastic. Um, like his immortals just like slapping down berserkers in combat because that's hilarious. So yeah, so that was a really fun game and a
Nice.
good opening moment. Got some cool red pat merch, the spot prize, and yeah, then ended up on table 5 or something, and it was against one of the Limerick guys who had come down, and he was using Ultramarines, and the game just generally like I literally couldn't. I tried making like I made every charge like an 11 or 12 just to be like I'll make this really hard for myself because everything just kept working, and I was trying to make them not work because I felt like it was steamrolling so hard, but everything kept working. And at times I was like, "Will you roll my charge?" And he just like bang, there's box cars. I'm like, so the challenge in that one was, and I was trying to even that one out a bit because I also didn't know him, was I put Angron directly in the middle as in the open as possible. I went, if I go first, I'm going to go for whatever Dara says is the spot price. And as I was about to move, you were like, the spot price is declare an epic challenge and kill a character in combat. And he had a unit that was like 34 or something like that away from Angron, like literally just at about like the 12-inch charge almost. So I plopped the +1 to charge. And I was like, oh look, I could go for that one if I went for +1, but then I don't have the um like Angron down his own. I was like, no, I can't do that. So he had another character who was like standing behind the Brutalis Dreadnought. I was like, if I kill the Brutalis Dreadnought, I could do that charge. So the Predator walked out and just one shot the Brutalis
That's so ridiculous.
with his dice. I picked up his dice for it. I was like, there you go.
Oh, that's
And he
so
was like,
dumb.
and I was like, 40k is easy.
40k
And
really
then
is
Angron
easy.
made the charge, and I declared skulls for the Skull Throne, and you were like, what the actual hell? And then so also when everything of mine was working, nothing of his worked. Like he'd roll like the double flamers and a redeemer. I think he rolled like 2 shots into Angron. His whole army went in Angron, brought him down to 1 wound. And he was like, right, I'm out of firepower. I can't kill Angron. And I was like, just charge him with the Land Raider and tank shock him. So we tank shocked him and rolled 10 5+s and yeeted him into orbit. So
Oh, that's
Angron
so
just got
good.
obliterated. Just yeeted into orbit. He's gone. Angron then immediately came back.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm so sorry, man. And then everything else just kept working, and I was like, I don't understand. I was like, I'm trying to make this not work, but it's working.
It's just one of those games,
Um,
right? Like
yeah,
sometimes it keeps happening. What can you do?
but we like the standout moment though was that that Land Raider just yeeting Angron, and it was just such a fantastic moment because we were both so happy for him to do it as well, because Angron came back down and he was the person to kill Angron most of the weekend because Angron came back multiple times that game and he just kept killing him. So he was delighted by that. He was like, "I'm the Angron Skulltaker," and I was like, "That's actually cool." Um, so yeah, no, like that was good crack. Then I was on table 2 against Luke Crowley, who, like, honestly, himself and his brother Connor have come a lot on, like, since I first would have known them, and their gaming is just like their competitive ability has jumped on leaps and bounds, for both of them, and he had a really really interesting list where he had a Chaos Knight and he had a bunch of deck guards, which were based around multiple squads of Death Road and Mortarion, and he had a few screens and a Rhino with multiple plague marine units, and then multiple blow drones. So it was a really interesting list. I was kind of going, oh, this kind of has an answer to literally everything I can throw at it. So I
Crucially, he got a
explained,
Predator as well, except Predators and Deckard are actually very good, so.
yeah, Predators and Deckard are very good. Once you can apply the -1 toughness, and the save, it's massive. So I was explaining kind of about the list and stuff like that, and he was like, "Right, let's go for this. Like, give me a good game." Like, and I was like, "Okay, I'll play full on." Um, I made a promise to Dara and Peter that I wasn't going to go for any more spot prizes at this point, and I tried really, really hard not to do it, which was debus the transport and kill everything inside.
Yeah, we need a new driver. This one's dead, was the line.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was, yeah, kill a transport and the boys inside.
Once you started introducing Dawn of War quotes, it was very hard for me to hold back because
I
that game
know the room
series
really
was,
kind of got into that one, yeah.
yeah. Well, Dawn of War, like, those guys made it incredible. So I think everyone had the nostalgia of it.
Yeah.
I was just kind of hoping there was the Even a Death I Still Serve or something.
Yeah, it was,
Uh,
yeah, I had a wide selection to choose from.
but your choices were very good. So playing into that game, um, it is quite a hard list for world leaders to go into in a lot of cases. The deck guard player having the choice of either nerfing your output or nerfing your survivability is like a really, really, really interesting choice that they have going into the game. They have that ability to take something out of your control and kind of go, right, I'm going to dictate the pace of this. Because by doing either the nerf to your damage, they can play a bit more conservatively, or they can play a bit more aggressively and take it out of your survivability. Um, he chose the survivability, so he chose the -1 save, and that meant there was a lot of my stuff where I was kind of saying, okay, sitting on a 4-up save isn't fantastic, and then obviously applying minuses on top of that is massive. So there were a few kind of key standout moments of what happened throughout that game where uh, he couldn't quite keep his screens where he wanted them to, and he played way too, because I was telling him, it's like, look, you can be a little bit more aggressive with your screens, because I'm like, you need to be able to keep a certain amount of separation, and you're trying to just avoid the consolidate afterwards. Um, there was one key move I made, which kind of saved me a lot of, because it was hard for me to get to things. Was he was pulling he deep struck in and rapid ingressed the Death Road with the Lord of Contagion in behind his knight and next to the Predator where he had his Chaos Knight. So that meant he would have had a really good overwatch into the Terminators who were setting up to kill the knight. And I had moved over the Heldrake over the unit of Poxwalkers in front of the knight to sweep them, killed one or two. And then it flamed, killed most of the screen, and then made an 11-inch charge to tag the Death Road so that they couldn't overwatch the Terminators. And he was like, "Oh, that was a fantastic move." And I was like,
That was cool. Yeah, I
"Well," I was
remember
like,
that.
"You asked me to go full. You asked me to go full way," and I was like, "That was the way of me guaranteeing that," because I had seen that there was a gap there, and I was like, do you really want to put them down there? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, you're definitely sure you want to put them there? And he was like, yeah. And he did kind of like pull them back a bit, but there was nowhere to put them where I couldn't have always gotten a charge off. It might have been the 12, but it was sitting on the 11 is where he put them down. And I made that charge, and he was like, oh, that was such a good move. And I was like, look, dude, it was also unlikely to happen. Like it's far less likely to happen than it is likely. But I was like, I had saved the CP for it as well. So that one I was very, very proud of. The Heldrake just winning absolute things for that point. Um, the Heldrake at this point in the tournament had racked up quite a kill count as well, which made me very, very happy. It bagged itself a monolith before it was killed. It killed a lone op lieutenant. Took 6 wounds off a repulsor flying over it to kill 5 stern guards, and then another 5 wounds off a ballistus. So it had done a ton of damage, and then in that game, it took out the Poxwalker screen, did a bunch of wounds, and I think it might have killed one of the Death Shroud. So its utility is there. You do have to use it in hover mode for it to really get the benefit out of it. But the threat of it, like into a lot of things, if you run the math is actually terrible. But the perceived threat of it is like way, way, way better because
Yeah,
people
it's
become terrified of it. They're like,
yeah.
it does what? Anti-fly 2+ with dev wounds, and
And
I'm
then you
like,
just
yeah,
kind of like murmur the rest of the profile, you're like,
and
oh,
I'm
this is
like, and
5
they're
or
like,
6.
how much does it cost? And I'm like, 210 points. Like, how much? I'm like, 210 points. And they're like, 210 points for that. I'm like, yes, sorry. And then they're like, the Helbrute does something crap, and they're like, oh, how much was that? And I'm like, 130. It's literally 80 points cheaper. Or the Helbrute turns around and does something amazing, like kill a Brutalis straight off the bat, and then the guy thinks it's the best thing in the world, and I'm like, this is basically your Dreadnought, but it's angrier,
Yeah.
slightly angrier. So, because I think somebody came over and they were like, "Oh, you got Mortarion? Did you get the Heldrake into it?" And I'm like, the Heldrake would go nowhere near Mortarion. Like he will never kill it. Like not even in 1,000 years. I was like, no, Angron battered him into submission. It was one of the few roles in that game that actually went like very well for me. Like everything else felt fine because the previous game felt like an overwhelmingly dice gamed, where I just went, dear God, I cannot stop rolling really, really well. And it didn't matter whether I picked out his dice or the dice next to on the table next to me or whatever, like nothing would work. And then the next game was like it felt kind of nice, except until Angron decided to roll up his damage and he rolled 40 something damage into
I
Mortarion.
mean, Angron's always statistically likely to kill Mortarion anyway,
Yeah.
I think. But yeah, it's when
It's
you
a feel good
really,
moment though.
yeah,
You're just like, oh, it's 40 damage. You're
yeah.
like, yes.
It's the way I always see it is like, would that have killed a Warhound Titan? And then I'm like, yeah, nice, that'll do.
He's just there like literally like smashing it, like literally the like a prince round into a blade slapped onto him. It's like it's so cool.
Yeah.
And yeah, so there was a few things there where so I spent a lot of time with Luke then at the end, where he was like, "What could I have done differently?" And there's a certain thing I always do with you can tell when people are blah blah blahing, when they can kind of hear you underwater when they're not really listening to the advice you're giving. Um, Luke is one of those people I've always found is like, and why I think his competitive gaming came on so much is that he listened to everything. So I showed him all the screens and what I would have done differently. And as he said it, he was like, "Oh, that's not really that wouldn't feel really comfortable." But he was like, "But I see why it will work." And he was like, "I'm going to try that." Um, so that was a really good note to because like he came out kind of like more hungry for like to learn stuff about the game, which was great. And that's kind of what you're always hoping when these things happen is that like they don't come out going, "Oh, that was really hard and I got smashed at the end," and you're kind of hoping actually that you turn around and go like, actually, you come home more hungry to be like, oh, well, I want to be able to do that and like to understand the whys and the hows of it. So that was great, and we had So then we all went out for drinks in town, and we went for pizza and everything, and burgers, and it was great. Like what a wonderful night.
We gave
I
you all loads of shit for the Heldrake. We gave Michael loads of shit for bringing a try hard Blood Angels list when he was supposed to be fun and fluffy.
Yeah, yeah, he was
Like
the other part of Team
he
Ireland
had
I
the
hadn't mentioned. He had actually taken a proper list.
but he had the
Uh,
goal to be like, this is a fluffy list. I'm like, this is Manny Chima's list from the WTC. Relax, like.
he was like, it doesn't have Lamartis, it has two chaplains, and we were like, we know that was the only part of it we didn't like. And he was like, it's fine, it's very fluffy, and we were like, yes, but sometimes fluffy is also the filthiest thing you can take.
Yeah, yeah,
Like I'm sure Angron and like 20 something exalted is fine, and that's very fluffy. It would also ruin most people.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, we gave him an awful lot of shit that night. And generally, I think the funniest thing was Mike brought along his friend Ryan, and he said what is quite possibly one of the funniest lines I've ever heard, which was, "I've never seen somebody come to a tournament and run it, and yet somehow, even though they're not playing, they're the only one with something to lose if Dan wins."
Oh.
Because
Yeah,
I was
actually,
I was saying you should
that's
go
pretty
into that.
important. Yeah, so because at this point I was stressed, I was getting very scared that you were in a tournament winning position because I knew if you won, I would have to have you on the channel on the Skulltakers. And I knew if you won, everyone was going to start looking at the Heldrake and saying, like, oh, maybe it must be competitively viable, or the Hellbrute, or the Predator, or any of the other trash in your list, like the 15 Terminators. And I remember messaging the boys, Jamie, Jack, and Brian, and like I think Brian's words were, if he wins the event, it will be the worst thing to happen to the World Eaters win rate in 10th edition. And yeah, we were stressed. So you were going to be playing Colin the next day, one of the other
Yeah,
WTC boys, who was bringing the hilarious Eandon Wraith Lord, Wraith, whatever list.
yeah,
And me and Colin have a storied history of me playing Colin in tournaments and Colin beating my ass into the ground, and obviously me hating Eldar, as every good Chaos player should. I was really torn because I was like, obviously I don't want Dan to win because of all the reasons I've said, but I also don't think I want Colin to win because it's Eldar, and me and Colin, we got that, like, I don't even call it a rivalry. It's just like a good meme at this point.
yeah,
Um, and it eventually turned out that I was kind of like, Colin, I need you to win this game. And he was like, I know it's bad if you want me to win over Dan. And I was just like, yep, it's that bad. I was like, the world leader's competitive win rate is on the line. My channel and its reputation is on the line. Like, there's a whole lot for me to lose here. I'll have to admit that Dan managed to win something with a Heldrake, which is also going to be really bad. It's also quite like, dirt in my face that the first time my models won a tournament was when it wasn't even me playing them. That was pretty rough too. So yeah, there was a whole lot on the line, and I was stressed during that entire night out. I was
yeah,
very, very, very stressed, and you were all winding me up about it as well. Like everyone kind of was like, "Well, we can all unify and get to this point where we're going to mock the TO," and I was like, "Boys, I will dish out the yellow cards like no tomorrow if this keeps going on." But yeah, it was an incredibly fun night out. I mean, the social on the Saturday night is always a really fun aspect of tournaments for me. It's like one of the most fun things, and I think it was great to see a lot of old faces, see a lot of new faces, and
Hmm.
everyone kind of coming together for it. But
And
yeah,
some
we
people
bounced.
mingling from groups who had never
Yeah,
met as well, which is a
yeah,
big deal.
that
Like
was
the kid.
really cool.
So for those listening, so a lot of the clubs in Ireland and the kind of social ones as well, they're all it's very disconnected. We're always trying to like bring people together, but it's never been an easy thing to do.
Which is weird,
Because
right?
yeah,
Because Ireland is
it's a small
tiny,
country. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah,
Um, and it meant for those who did travel from different clubs, they were able to meet up and kind of go like, oh my God, actually, you're only like an hour down the road from me. And they talked about like some of their social links and everything. So in that respect, Dearg Doom actually opened up a lot of doors for a lot of people, which was the whole point of this. Like not just doing it competitively, but also kind of as part of the country is like making feel like the Dublin lads were getting a bit closer, and like the Kilkenny guys coming down and that sort of thing. So it was a really really wonderful night.
Yeah.
And there was an awful lot of beverages consumed, or brews, and yeah, we had a great night.
Yeah.
So yeah, so then
So
was
game
the
four.
the
This is
morning
when
of the
things
mocking.
got pretty serious. Because yeah, actually, it's worth noting in game in battle round three or in round three, there was 8 undefeated players. 4 of them were WTC players, and none of them managed to pair each other. And everyone was like, "Dara's fixing the pairings." I was like, "I just loaded up on on BCP. I can't do anything about this." So all the WTC players were undefeated going into tournament round four, which meant they all played each other. You paired Colin, and of
Joe
the
came back.
four of the 4 of you, or well, I suppose the 3 possible opponents, which one would you have wanted to face the least in round four?
Joe, because Joe, I generally don't like to say this to people, but Joe's actually a better player than me now. Shh, don't tell him. Um, I love that guy to absolute bits, and it was after a broadsword. We had this wonderful game where we started chatting, and it turned into he kind of like we did like WTC prep where he'd like come in here to Cork. We get like a ton of food, so much so that waitresses used to be like, are you actually going to eat all this food? Is there more coming? And we're like, no, there's just 2 of us. Like we just really like our food. He's having a cheat day, and I'm a fat bastard. Um, so like we're grand, and we'd have like a load of drinks, and we'd be playing 40k till like half 2 in the morning, and like trying out like a million different combinations. And honestly, like elevated, like I've been playing a long time, elevated Joe's game in ways that he had never conceived, and also with me as well. And Joe also had a list that when I looked at it, I was like, okay, this is a world leaders list that will absolutely just take me to town. Um, but it was it was kind of hard to tell because like it was about to be Colin because the deployment and the layout for this was very open,
It was rough, yeah.
but for the mission, which was Terraform, I was thinking that actually the displacement of the world leaders and the continuous scoring was that if he was able to push harder at the start, it would be so hard for me to push him off of things.
Hmm.
And that continuous rolling scoring would actually kind of snowball against me harder than any of the other opponents. Mike's list raw was worse for me to play,
Yeah.
but in terms of like the list and the mission, the actual like Joe was the one I was like dreading. I was like, oh my god. Um, Ended up playing Colin, and we had a very very tactical game for two like what felt like a cripple fight of
I
a
actually,
game.
you know what? You were fighting on table one, and I think that was the most fucking bullshit game I've ever seen on any
Mm.
table one anywhere because it was like you've got 3 Rate Lords, 3 Rate Seers, 3 Hemlocks, and a Sword and Board Rate Knight versus your
And Uriel,
monstrosity.
and
And
Uriel,
Uriel, of course.
yeah,
Um, and like, walking past, I can tell you're having this extremely tactical game. You're all trying to pull the most that you can out of it. And then
mm,
you look at the table, and there's like this disconnect being like, my brain couldn't really put the two things together.
yeah,
It was genuinely awful to look at.
yeah.
I gotta say, but hilarious. Like it gave me such a good laugh.
And honestly, like usually myself and Colin play, like we both play very fast 40k because we're like, but not only do we play to each other's intent, we kind of already seem to know what each other's intent is as we're doing it. So you're like, oh yeah, you want to move those over here. Look, I'm just gonna hand you models. You put them down for me there. I'll roll you up in advance over here. Like we're almost like playing the game in like a perfect synergy. There was one of the events we went to up north where we were testing out some like potential lists, and we played 4 games in the time that it took the other players in the round to finish turn 2. Because like we got it down to a T. Like so whenever I play him, like he like Colin is a supremely good player. Um very, very disciplined, has an amazing control of the game. So it very much came down to a thing of um his number of units is not something that's normally in his wheelhouse. So for this scenario in particular, he had to kind of watch all his angles. to make sure he was able to set up some counters, um, and eventually ended up wearing down through a few bits. Um, because there was one point, and it was the critical turn where um, the Terminator survived a ton. It's like I spiked up massively in some 4-ups, and the Terminators just sat there kind of saying, was that it? Because the other Terminators had been charged, counter charged in the previous turn, and had lost 4 guys to a single Rate Lord. And I'm just kind of going, oh, right, okay, so all the Terminators are just going to die this game. And then the ones in the middle just held and held and held. Everything else didn't do so great. I kind of tactically threw Angron out to displace a lot of his movement early game. And in a lot of ways, it would look like it was a bad trade. It was Angron for Rate Lord and positioning, because I tagged another Rate Lord. And he was kind of looking at me, kind of being like, right, well, he had to bring a lot of firepower to bear, which meant I kind of knew where things were going to be for a bit, including the hemlocks, which actually made a big difference to me. And then what really hurt him was at the end of the game, there was like some critical scoring cards that he was starting to middle out a bit. And my cards at the start were terrible, and my cards at the end were good. So that kind of like, it made it feel like, okay, well, he's comfortable. Oh no, actually, it's going like that. And being able to use things like so the Heldrake once again kind of was used as a bit of a distraction card effects for a while. But the real champions of that match were the Terminators, who just held in the middle. And the Exalted, who stops the Wraith Knight falling back, which was pretty critical. So yeah, that game was very tough. And he played an immense game. As he said, like, it was about learning a lot about like who you are and what you play. And he got to learn a lot about like how much value he does get out of his normal army.
Yeah, like that wide MSU kind of build.
Yeah, and like I know for me, it taught me a lot about kind of because like we do a lot of like kind of like peer coaching when we do the team stuff, and being able to see the way that he played that game was very good.
Nice.
So yeah, no, it was a good game, really good game.
Sweet.
And then we had round 5.
The finals. Yeah, world leaders on world leaders. So Joe had managed to get the win against Mike, which meant that you two were going to meet in the final. And I had no qualms about who I wanted to win this game. I was begging Joe to beat you. I was like, I
Yeah,
don't want to have a fucking Heldrake winning list on this channel next week.
I know.
It's like, do whatever you need to do. And
I
this
was
was an
almost on my
interesting
knees
game.
begging Joe. I was like, Joe, let me win, just
Like,
let me win.
think about it, man. It's like World Leaders Mirror in the final on Search and Destroy deployment. It doesn't get much better than that, right?
Yeah.
Why don't you break it down for us? How did the final go?
So it was taking hold with hidden supplies. So there's lots and lots of scoring going on. For me and Joe, we had two very, because like we talked it out at the end and we're like what we would like our perceptions of things. So for me, I very much said if Joe had posted up in the center and just put immediate pressure on me, um, there was very little I could do. Now he would have taken some wear and tear damage, but eventually would roll across. In his opinion, he couldn't do that because the firepower I had was able to like the Heldrake will pick up the bones of 5 Marines, so I can take out the smaller squads with that. He can charge another, take out the bones of it, and they're not going to kill it in return. So there's a lot of like cool stuff like that I could do into him. Some of my stuff can trade up quite well in terms of like the Hellbrew can walk into a unit, slap some things down, consolidate into something else, slap that because they slap me. Um, so we had two very different approaches. So I played quite aggressively because I'm an aggressive player when I play the game. Um, I I think once you know the strengths of your units, you kind of you know when you can be cagey and you know when you can stand off, and then you know when you can be a little bit cheeky about it and push. Um, and then Joe threw me some curveballs. So he put down the prince and then oathed the Heldrake,
He was after my
which
heart with that
I
play.
was like, God damn it. So I used the Heldrake to go up, flames 5 Marines, killed like 3 of them. In his turn to eat the Overwatch, he moved them first, so I killed the remaining 2, Overwatch them, and then the Prince came in and absolutely just yeeted the Heldrake into orbit, which was such a cool move because he like him killing the Heldrake was such a cool cinematic moment
Yeah,
because Angron was sitting in the room behind, and like it's almost like he's scaring him down because I know the lore of that specific model, with your Angron and like the whole thing
and
going
my
on
prince.
there.
Yeah, yeah. For
So that was
context,
a
for anyone
really
who
cool moment.
anyone watching who also knows the lore, this was my winged demon prince Macrolor, the leader of my warband, who, for anyone who doesn't know, absolutely hates Angron. So yeah, it was like I saw it happening, and I was like, oh no, the face off is happening again.
And so it did happen. So next turn I threw Angron at him because I'm like, first of all, that's the cool moment. And then I was like, secondly, I do actually need to take this piece off the table. Um, I did a bunch of positioning that I was very, very proud of, I have to say. Um, and I was wondering to myself, I was like, okay, well, how long will Joe remain like where he is? Because some of his moves are actually more kind of like withdrawn than what I expected, and some were a little bit more aggressive. And I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of throwing me a bit. So Angron went into his favorite new friend, Macrolor, and Macrolor went, "Sir, this is your ass. You can take some wounds." And I'm a massive, massive Demon Prince. Good luck to you, and pass all the saves. So I was
40k
like,
is
oh,
easy.
okay, 40k is easy. Yeah. So going to turn 3, I'd been kind of pressing the primary. So I was racking up points. Um, Most importantly, in Joe's turn 2, um, or my turn 3 came in, did a bunch of moves, moved the Hellbrood up and charged a unit that was in next to one of the objectives, slapped the unit. They slapped me, slapped the unit again, killed them. So I took him off primary on that objective. So it was a pretty good trade for me there. He did a bunch of moves that were obviously going to kill the Hellbrute, and I ingressed 5 Terminators down next to them, just out of charge range, but enough that I could just waddle onto the objective. Because I was outside of, I was like sitting on like the 10-inch mark, and I was kind of going, that's actually fine, but I can just run onto this and do nothing and just take that objective off him on an average roll. Because getting the +2 move is easy because like it's like just any double. So I was like, I can guarantee that. And he was like, oh, that's a really annoying move. And I was like, I was very proud of that one. Where
That's
I
a
just
nice
went
one.
on and went,
Yeah.
that's mine. And he was like, he was like, you could tell that I didn't care about losing the 5 Terminators, that I was just denying him 5 primary.
Mm.
So I was particularly proud of that move. Then he did one that I should have, in retrospect, known about, but he did it in a way that was so blatantly fantastic that it annoyed me. Was he threw 2 spawn out to tip over one of my primaries, and take the jackals off it with and he had 1 spawn there and another spawn going onto another objective, which when I killed the unit, he sticky the back one. I was like,
Oh, that's good. Yeah,
oh, I
that's
was like, that
nice.
was such a good move. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, I was like, don't show it, don't show it, don't show it. But that was a really good
Mm.
move. And that sticky objective was very important. Um, so I think the critical thing that got it was he threw 6/8 bounds in the next turn into Angron and didn't kill him.
Yes. Yeah, I saw that.
And when Angron didn't kill him, I think he killed like half the unit, and I used the 3 Exalteds I had to finish off a good amount of it. And then he was like, look, I might as well just keep hitting Angron and see if I can kill him. Because killing the 3 Exalteds would have gotten him nothing at that point, and Angron was in kill range. and he didn't. So that was pretty big. And also being able to heroically intervene the Terminators onto Khorne, who went into the Jackals. He rolled like an 11 or a 12 or something pretty high. So he had to base everyone. Because if he had rolled like a 5 or a 6, he could have like stayed fairly close near the front of the unit. But he had to go around a bit, and then I was able to intervene.
Oh, that's
Um,
rough. Yeah.
because he was looking at one side of the unit and not the other. And that's where on one side was the Exalted, and he thought I was going to intervene with those. But intervene with the Terminators. In hindsight, either of them probably would have been fine, because when you're slapping 5 Marines in Khorne and Khorne can't slap the Exalted, you're probably still fine.
Yeah.
One Eviscerator into the Exalted is fine. I then made a big misplay in turn 5, or well, setting up for turn 5, which was when I moved Khorne and the Rhino and stuff. I should have gotten Khorne and the guys out, ran them towards the central objective, and had them placed there for turn 5 to do some killing, do some counter plays. I moved Khorne and the Rhino in it, away from one of my objectives. So I just gave up 5 primary there, so that could have cost me the game. That was both myself and Joe tilted ourselves into like every move we made was, oh, you've won. On both sides. We like absolutely just biased ourselves into thinking we've cost ourselves the game because we did a move. Which I think, like, I know for me was very much the thing of like, I know how good Joe is. So I'm like, he can capitalize on this. And then something would happen, and then I'd be like, oh no, I'm back in it.
Yeah.
So it was like an emotional roller coaster. So when I hit turn 5, I was like, yeah, maybe that wasn't a great move. But in the end, it was actually a secret mission, my least favorite thing in the world, that got Joe a bucket of points. I think he said actually when we reworked it out, if he had not taken it, it still would have been fine. It still would have been the same points. But the looming thing of the secret mission made me play differently, which
It's
is
so annoying.
part of the
Yeah.
reason why it happens. And his Angron was just fully powered up, and there was very little I could do to counter him on the side that he was on. Hero of the game goes to the distraction Khorne effects of a predator, who basically acted as like a big booga, like boogeyman. Through the whole thing, when his firepower did decide to light things up, it did some damage, but its actual displacing of things was very important. And near the end of the game, he was actually threatening an objective, so Joe actually had to like actively deal with him, which was made him way worth his points. Because like the -1 from the cannon with the -1 for against infantry is pretty big into like 8 bound, who are already sitting on 3 wounds.
Yeah.
And it also meant Joe was often having to pick 6+ feel of pain from his blood god roll. And yeah, like a really, really hard game. And it ended up on exactly 78.
Yeah. And that draw with the victory points that you'd accrued throughout the rest of the games managed to eke out the win in the tournament. Yeah, how did it feel to win with that list? Tell me about it, Dan.
It was the single greatest moment of my life. And I'm never going to let you let this down, ever.
No, I
Ever.
know.
I'm going to go on about this forever.
Mm,
It was pretty great. It's good to have for like multiple reasons. One was because it was a good list to use to like come down from the like I have like this perfectly optimized list that I love, and I have all my janky tricks and everything. This was a very much a I have to use everything well. I have to like look at where my board state every turn. I have to watch every single move I make. Like even minutia of like, am I slightly turned out here in case that thing does this thing? Everything was on the table as a, if you lose this unit or you displace this unit and you move it wrong, and you don't like use your grenades when you have them, or you forget to charge in the place, or anything could just completely scupper your game. And in that respect, it was great. Another respect was I got to play a lot of really fun and complex games. Because you don't want to win with something like that and also have it just be like really, really easy is like you do want to play some proper games. Um, because I know that was like a fear for like some people online. They're like, oh, who did he play? Like three lads from down the road or something. It's like I played really, really good players. Um, and had a lot of fun along the way, was a big part. Got to use a stunningly beautiful army. Like anybody who's seen your toys knows exactly what I'm talking about. In particular, the Angron with the bacon wings, as you said.
Yeah, old Bacon Wings
Um,
himself.
like it is a big part of it because like I love the lore. I love like immersive things, and like actually your tables really, really help with that. Dearg Doom, like in Irish tournaments, we don't tend to have a lot of really, really great terrain, and especially with playing at WTC, is everything becomes a bit samey because all the buildings are identical. And like some of them have different like facings or facades, things like that. But all of your tables felt like they were unique, so it actually was like a lot more immersive. Um, and the last table had zone eight on
Zone
it,
8, baby.
so
Yeah.
that was kind of awesome.
Yeah,
Um,
I like Zone 8.
and it was really great to spend the weekend with a lot of people who genuinely wanted to have a lot of fun, but learn more about the whole thing that draws us into like the competitive side of 40K. It's like the friendships, the late night sitting up chatting about lists, the like all of that starts from something like this. And that's what made it kind of like extra cool. We did a few of those kind of things in Cork in the past, and I still fondly remember my list with six defilers, for exactly that sort of nonsense.
Yeah.
But it makes it feel special when you can do it with so many awesome things involved and like those spot prize moments. I'll come away with memories there that will last me a lifetime of like it was fantastic. That and as I said, and the most important part is I'm going to mock you forever. I'm never going to let you forget this.
It's entirely fair, and entirely deserved. I simply don't have a valid or viable way to retaliate because you
That's
won with
fair.
the most garbage list ever, and I'm still struggling to podium.
Well, what I would say is, so there were one or two critical last things about the event and the list that kind of. So I know the list is unusual, but it did teach me like it gave me a lot of respect for how fun world leaders are.
I was gonna
Like,
say, yeah, would you play
yeah,
World Leaders again, having played them now?
absolutely. And I had played a few games with Mike, for example, when we were training him up for some of the Team Ireland stuff. I played him kind of a few bits here and there, but never like properly. Um, and like as much as people say it's like that's a bit of a joke list, like it's still you can play less competitive lists in a competitive way. And a certain amount of it was to purposefully hamstring myself so that I had a harder time of it. And I had to like push myself out of my comfort zone of like all my really good units that do these things and the synergies. And like this one is obviously like there isn't very much synergy in that list. And when you boil it back to those kind of things, you kind of really teach yourself about like, okay, well, what does this unit do? What does that unit do? Where am I applying things on the table? Like the Heldrake, honestly, the Heldrake is a 165 point unit with a 210 point price tag. Because and with a caveat that you pretty much can't use it as an aircraft, which is ironic because you can't charge.
Yeah,
So it takes away half of the whole purpose of having it. And it also teaches you about things like why are you putting something in your list? Like it could be very easy for people after this event to say, like, I'm gonna try Heldrake because one did well at an event. Like none of that was ever the point of this. And I think unless you really, really want to have one in your list, or maybe you want to have that experiential thing of like maybe you don't quite use hovering units or you don't use aircraft and you want to like learn the game state more. Something like that isn't worth the time you're going to invest in the tournament. Like with games with friends, it can be a lot of fun, but you might find that you're actually going to diminish your own experience of the game just to try something that you really want to work, and sometimes that can be a big disappointment. Like realistically, if I look at how the Heldrake did on the weekend, it was vastly, vastly terrible for like what I needed to do. It was awful. It was like having a puppy nip on my heels the whole fucking walk home.
Yeah.
Um, the Hellbrute in a lot of ways was great, but once again, like having a Hellbrute on W or on GW terrain with a multi melta is actually a really bad version of it. If it had a long range weapon and the fist or the hammer, fine. But the multi melta is actually kind of a hamstring a bit there as well. On WTC layouts, it might be a bit better. The Predator, a huge hamstring as well, especially if you do what I did, which is forget about Angron's aura
Yeah.
applying to shooting as well.
Small factor that, yeah, you
Yeah,
realize in like game four or something like that.
yeah. And by game four, you mean I didn't use it all weekend because I completely forgot. And it was something you pointed out, and like honestly, I made myself a bit of a cheat sheet of like things to remember. Um, which was great to have and it's fantastic. Um, but the Predator was a bit of a hindrance at times because you're kind of saying he can't really dislodge himself if he gets locked in combat because he doesn't have the firepower for it.
Yeah, he's just stuck.
Ironically, unless it's something like I don't know 3 8 bound charge him, but that's about it. And he can maybe dislodge that, but also his physical bulk blocking out on GW deployments can be quite hard to like position everything else. The Heldrake as well is also, and for anybody trying it out, the Heldrake will displace a lot of your list by being placed down on the table, and you need to really think about where it's moving. Now, GW terrain where you can jump the 4 inches up and over, fine. It's actually not too much of a hindrance, but it will block off where you can deploy because getting line of sight to the Heldrake is for anything that's very fast, not difficult. And you might find that you are sacrificing a lot of your board position just to make sure that this thing, which is trying to make it seem jazz hands itself from space, um, is actually going to really, really hamper the rest of your deployment and your subsequent movement phases. So you do have to kind of be aware of that. If you have the rest of your list as infantry, fine. But I had to worry about an Angron. I had to worry about a 10-man Terminator blob. I had to worry about the Predator and the Rhino in terms of footprint. And then once you add the Heldrake in, it was a lot of hindrance on multiple fronts for multiple units. Um, Very much deployment dependent as well. Some of them were bigger, some of them were smaller, but it is quite a hard unit to use. Into certain matchups, it's quite good. Like the anti-fly 2 plus devastating, if you could get off sustains and go into the right unit combination with some rerolls with Angron, you could do some work. It's a lot of setup, and one of the bigger parts is that it finds it hard to stand in certain places, which is both a hindrance to you and to the opponent at times because you can put it down and just be like, "You're not going there.
Yeah.
Can you move through a giant oval? No, because I'm hovering." But I think if anyone was to take away anything from this experience, what I did would be don't be afraid to try out new units. Do it on your own time where it's not in a tournament where you can really analyze how you feel about something. Because there's nothing worse than when you go to a tournament and you really want something to perform and you want to have a fun experience and enjoy the whole thing. And then if you come away from that experience saying, if I hadn't taken this thing, I would be way less annoyed right now because I had a great event except for that one thing. If you would spend your time
That sounds awfully
practicing them,
familiar to the time that I brought the Heldrake to Coventry.
yeah, yeah. And if we had gotten more experiential games with you at home, maybe that might have actually changed
Yeah,
that list.
yeah.
But yeah, yeah. It was a wonderful event, and thank you so much for running it as well. It was really, really good fun. Um, and to any of the guys who were there who might still have made it to this point of listening to me yammering on, hopefully you all enjoyed it as well and you'll come back because that was great crack.
Yeah, it was awesome. And it was awesome to have the chat. I'm sure you've answered a lot of questions that people have had. I've gotten substantial number of messages already being like, are you going to interview the Heldrake guy? I'm like, I know
Right.
the Heldrake guy. Like, we hang out all the time. It's gonna be fine.
You know what the
So
worst part about this is, in a lot of ways, is that
tell
like
me.
like you know me, I like my janky lists. I've had some like really unique lists, like properly competitive ones that I've done really well with. This might be the one that is most known for now, and
It's
that
gonna go
in
down.
itself
Yeah.
is
It's gonna be a fairly significant one. I think maybe the Tau one that you had in ninth with the
oh
planes.
the Sun Sharks were
Yeah.
back before literally nobody was using it,
Yeah,
and
that list became
that
quite
opening
big.
line where they were like, "Look, whenever we talk about Tau lists and custodians lists below, ignore all of them. They're all this list except for when we pointed out." And then they got to mine and went, "This is a genuinely interesting list." And I was
Yeah.
like, "Yeah." I was
But
really
this
hoping it was the
list.
Firestorm that people would remember, to be honest.
Yeah,
Or
that
my
would
or my.
that's hard to play though, that one.
But look, as long as the Heldrake somehow does not go up points from this, is the key
Can
thing.
you imagine? If it goes up points, we can literally like pinpoint exactly why. You know, it's
I'll
like
just get a load of like Heldrake shaped hate mail.
yeah.
Oh yeah, and you should tell people as well is that you actually did give me your Heldrake afterwards.
That is, yeah, that is a thing. What were my exact words again? Take this away
I
from me. I never
take
want to
this away
see it
from me.
again.
I never want this in my home or to see it again.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
like the actual hate you have for that model's journey, and like I've seen it from start to finish of like you getting the model, doing an amazing paint job, doing up the base because like you didn't normally do the oval ones,
Yeah.
and like I think you did like one test game with it, and then you were like, right, okay, I will bring it to Coventry and we'll try it out, and it went through like different iterations of trying, and you were like, I hate this, like I hate this so much, and I was like, Dara, please try it more, come on, that's good, and
And I never
then
did.
like literally dusting it off out of the box for this, and then it coming full circle and coming to me.
Yeah. And I'll
This
have
was my
another
plan
one
all
ready for
along.
you for the next Dearg Doom. Yeah, then you'll
Look,
have to
look,
bring two.
just for everyone's awareness, right? I did ask Dara, right, if he'd be willing to paint up two more Heldrakes, and I think if I ever was to be spited by somebody's luck, it was Dara's luck when I asked him to paint two more Heldrakes.
Yeah. I think I that look went straight into your soul and tied a chain around it.
I was like, I might have gone a little too far this time. I
Just
was
a
like,
little bit, yeah.
that might be the line is asking him to paint any more Heldrakes,
For
where he
free as
literally,
well. You were like, paint me two Heldrakes.
I would pay you, I would pay you
It's
just
not
for the
happening. You can't
like.
pay me enough for that.
I know I was going to be like there is no price tag that high.
No,
It's
there
like
isn't.
it makes
Um,
me bleed my own blood.
yeah, it was certainly a thing that's happened. It's certainly a list that has won a GT, and you are certainly an individual that I know and love. But yeah, it was really awesome to have you on, man. It's been a long time coming, I think, but I feel like the wait was worth it because what better
Mm.
way to do a video together for the first time than with this stupid stuff? Like this is actually just the best. Um, that said, if you are watching this, I do think Dan had a lot of really important things to say here about trying out new stuff, about positional stuff in games and like how you analyze board states and how you can take a different list with units that you wouldn't normally bring to see if you can improve aspects of your game and all that kind of good stuff. So yeah, look, I hope it has been worth the watch for all you folks. And if you want to catch more of us, you know where to find us. The links are down below. You can hop into our Discord where Dan, you're in the Discord, so you can
Yeah,
ping Dan in there and ask him more about the Heldrake, or you can ping me and ask me about anything else that isn't the Heldrake. And you can catch all of our other videos. We will have a review of the event that I ran coming out next week, just as a perspective of people who might want to think about start running events as well, what that's kind of all about. But for now, we are going to leave off on this episode of Skulltakers. Possibly, I don't know, possibly the most infamous episode of Skulltakers we've done so far. It's been a pleasure, Dan.
yeah, it's
I've
been
been
great,
Dara.
man.
This has been Dan. Until the next one, folks. Stay healthy, stay safe, and kill Main Bird.